fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hello, Salt Strong Nation. Joe Simons, like diamonds. We are back. Got brother Luke here. What's up, dude?
Ready to talk some gear this time, Joe.
So we just posted a really awesome podcast all about fishing reels. I got on there with Mark, and we covered everything you want to know about the upcoming reels, in particular, inshore saltwater spinning reels. And one thing that we've been seeing, like crazy, it's not like one or two. We're talking about like tons and tons of reels being sold in the 1000 series. And apparently that's kind of like a new thing because, you know, you have all the power you need. You don't really need a whole lot more drag. I mean, we're seeing like the Daiwas, the Shimanos in that 1000 series for catching redfish and speckled trout and snook. I mean, flying off the shelves. And we're kind of curious. And also I understand why. And we're going to talk about why that's happening. But we also were curious, like, what is it a good deal? Like, or should you just stick with the 3000? So Luke, talk about why first. Why are people buying these smaller series inshore spinning reels right now?
Well, I mean, there's a variety of reasons, and I'm not sure everybody's decision is probably a little bit different, but the premise, at least my thoughts on 1000 size reels versus 3000. So I have one of each right here, and I've just started doing some tests with them because it's been I've been curious to know the actual difference. So this is a 1000, and then this one over here is the 3000. And I have if I put the two reels next to each other, you'll see that the diameter of the spool on the 1000 is obviously a lot smaller than the 3000. And so my thought is that these 1000s, since that diameter is smaller, it'll probably cast further, right? Because those coils are going to be much thinner, and they'll fly through the guides a little bit easier. Also, these 1000 size reels, even though they're smaller with braid, like now that braid is becoming much more popular, this little tiny reel, if 10-pound braid is going to be used, this little tiny reel can still hold about 150 yards of braid, and that's all the braid you need. And when we're using 10-pound braid, the actual drag tension that we need to have, really with any line, the drag tension you need to have is about 20 to 30% of your weakest line strength. So if we're using a 10-pound braid, the only drag we need is 3 pounds, right? So any reel has 3-pound drag. Like these small reels, this is a Daiwa Fuego. This has like an 8-pound drag rating. So this little tiny reel can hold 150 yards of line and provide enough drag to handle all the fish we need is the premise. I
want to repeat that because I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions out there about buying a spinning reel, or any reel for that matter, but we hear it so much on the inshore scene. Oh, this bad boy's got 25, 30 pounds of drag. Like, assuming you are using 10 to 15 pound, even 30 pound braid, it's impossible to really have to need that much drag if you're truly setting your drag correctly.
Yeah, but it comes into play, right? I mean, if that's the rating, right? That's just to make sure that a fish will never break off. Right. But I mean, if you're fishing docks or like heavy structure and current and bigger fish, then that's when you would actually bump up that percentage a little bit higher. But still, you're not going to do 100%.
That's my point. So if someone says they got 20-pound drag or 23, whatever it is on it, you and I both know what happens when you lock it all the way down. It's going to obviously snap. The line's not meant for that, is my whole point. So yep. It's almost impossible to ever use all of that. But then again, right. I get it. It's kind of like having a fast car. You know, your speedometer might go up to 160. You're probably never going to use that. You're usually going to be in that, 50 to 80 range.
But it's cool that, that you can, if you need it, you can.
Yeah. But I think that's a good reminder.
As far as real drag, I used to, years ago, oh man, it says a 20 pound drag rating. That must be awesome. I don't now I don't care about the drag rating. I want it to be smooth. Like I care about how smooth is the drag. So when a fish is running, is it totally smooth, or is it going to have some like hiccups along the way? And some of those reels that have a high rating, they don't have a very strong very smooth. So I prefer smoothness over strength, again, for this inshore fishing when we're using light braid. And the reason why light braid is so important is it just enables us to cast further. Like these big fish that push up in the shallow water, they're going to be spooky, and whoever can cast the furthest will generally catch the most fish. And so it's a really big advantage to use that light line with some good gear to be able to actually land the fish once they are hooked up. So anyhow, so I've just started doing some tests on the 1,000 size reels, and last week I went out and did a casting test. So I had the same brand, so both Iowa Fuegos. One, it was a 3,000 spooled up a 10-pound braid. The 1,000 spooled up a 10-pound braid. I had the same amount of line on relative to the edge of the spool, right? So the same gap. That gap is very important because that's basically what's going to control your casting distance. So the same gap. And I actually casted them out with the same weight, right? There was a little casting weight on there.
Same rod?
So yeah, same rod, same everything. They're literally the same everything across the board except for the reels. And I was very surprised because really the two different things that were being tested, I guess the two different things that would impact casting distance would be, the overall question was, is it better to have fewer rotations that are a little bit wider, right? So with the 3,000, if you pull out a yard, let's say just a yard of line, you're going to have fewer rotations than you would with the 1,000 because the diameter is much thicker, right? But those coils are going to come out wider. And then with a 1,000, right, you're going to have thinner coils, but you're going to have more coils. And so with that casting contest, it turns out that having the fewer coils actually was a little bit more of an advantage than having the tighter coils. So the 3,000 actually cast a little bit further than the 1,000, which I was surprised. I didn't think that was the case. I was thinking that I was going to prove that the 1,000 was going to be good for casting. And it turns out, all else being equal, it appears that it's not.
Interest. So that brings up like a whole nother subject about all these new guides on the rods. They're making these little micro guides and all that. That's something we got to test then. Because based on that same theory, they might not be as good as marketed.
Yeah. So, it is like, how important is it to be able to condense, to I guess, thin out those coils as it's shooting through the rod? I don't know. It is interesting. Like some of the really high end rods, they don't have those wave guides or whatever they're called. I've tried rods with them before, and I really can't tell a difference. I'll be surprised if there's that big of a difference, given that like the really high end ones aren't using it. Like those high end G Loomis rods, like Gary Loomis seems like he looks into everything, and the fact that he's not using them makes me kind of question if they're good or not. But again, haven't tested it, so I don't know.
Interesting. So let's go back to why someone would pick a 1,000 series. I imagine price comes in as well. The 1,000 is cheaper than a 3,000.
So for Iowa, it's not. So some of them are, some of them aren't. The one thing that's a guaranteed is it's going to be lighter. So for those who have like elbow or shoulder issues, that has come up a lot. Where I need something light. I need as light as possible. So that's the guaranteed. It's guaranteed going to be lighter. There's no question about that. And as long as you're using light line, it's guaranteed to hold enough line for typical inshore fishing. Obviously, if you're going after tarpon, you would not use a 1,000. And your drag, right? As long as you're using light line, you're going to have plenty of drag. Where I think the 1,000 is a bad thing, or it can be a negative versus the 3,000 or 2,500s or whatever, like the more commonly purchased sizes, is I believe, again, I haven't yet used this. I just did the test and that's it. But I believe the risk of wind knots is going to be higher with the 1,000 because just to make, again, let's say we're making a 100-foot cast a bunch of times, there's going to be those coils come off a lot faster, right? You're going to have to for each cast, there's going to be more coils shooting off. And to me, it just seems like it's going to increase the risk of like one of those coils coming off a little bit faster than it would otherwise. So I think that using these smaller reels are going to increase the wind knot. Using these smaller reels with a thinner diameter spool is going to increase the risk of wind knots. Again, haven't proven that, but to me, it just makes sense.
Well, it makes sense. Yeah. I mean, there's more opportunities for something to go wrong if you have that many. Talk about 2,500. So how does that fit in? I know the 2,500 is going to look and probably even feel a whole lot closer to 3,000.
Yeah. I mean, in most cases, I can't say most cases, at least for the Fuegos, like in the Shimano Stratics that I use a decent amount, the actual outside spool. So between the 3,000 and 2,500, they generally have the same actual reel housing, if you will, and the spool diameter on the outside is the same. Like the outside rim will generally be the same. It's the actual arbor, the diameter of the arbor. So the 2,500 will just have a little bit thicker arbor, so that relative to the 3,000, the 3,000 will be a little bit thinner, so that it could hold more line. It's really just line capacity. Can
you please explain what arbor means for those of our listeners who are scratching their heads saying, what is Luke the scientist talking about over here?
Yeah, so arbor is basically the inner part of the reel spool that you actually tie your line to. Like when you get a reel straight out of the box, I wish I had one straight out of the box.
I got one right here. Hi-yo, new Daiwa that came in, baby, on fishstrong.com. Insiders get 20% off.
Oh, sweet. We got them in. Nice. Yep. I need to get another 2,500.
This is a 3,000. Yeah.
Sweet. So the arbor is what Joe is showing. It's basically that, that inner part of the spool when you get it out of the package. That's what you tie your line directly to. And that's a good thing you brought that up. So the questions have come in, okay, like I want to use 10-pound line on a 3,000 or 2,500 size reel. Like, what should I do? And so I would say, just to save money, I always put monofilament line. So I tie monofilament line to the arbor. That's going to do multiple things for you. Number one, it's going to make sure that there's no slippage, right? If you just tie braid straight to the arbor itself, the braid just does not have a very good friction coefficient, if we want to get scientific.
Nice.
But the braid will be at risk of actually slipping around the arbor, and that's going to wreck the whole system. You're going to have to take off all the braid and then redo it, because the reel won't work, right? The line will just spin around the spool, around the arbor. So use mono. So that way monofilament line will never slip. And you can actually spool a decent amount of line onto the reel. Like I get mine about half and half. Like I put about half of the spool of mono, and then I try to leave enough gap so that I can get about 150 yards of braid, which is all the braid that I want. That way you can save a bunch of money, right? Load up the base of the spool with the much less expensive monofilament line, and then put the good stuff up top. The good stuff that's more expensive up top. And that's it. And so that way you can have the advantages of not having to spend a ton of money online with the bigger, the bigger size reels, which seems to, at least in my opinion, so far, it seems like that's the best combination.
So going back to price, because I've never bought a 1,000, but I always assumed there was going to be a slight discount. Is there not? In the, let's just say Daiwa, because we've been talking about it. It's one of our favorites. Yeah. So Daiwa 1,000, 2,500 to 3,000, all the exact same price?
On the Fuegos there are. That's the only one. I've never, that's the only Fuego. That's the only 1,000 reel I've bought. I'm sure there's some. Like usually when you go up to the 4,000, it's going to be higher. But when you go down from 4,000 to like 3,000 and 2,500s, those are pretty much the same. And it seems like, at least again, the one in particular that I bought was the same price.
Interesting. Yeah. It still baffles me. I mean, how many 1,000 series reels that we sell for targeting saltwater redfish and snook and trout. Now, you mentioned tarpon earlier, because that's going to be what some of the heavy core drag guys will say, well, gosh, you're going to need it. And I agree. It would be nice on occasion, if you're going after a tarpon or grouper, to have a little bit more oomph to it, but that also means you got to use heavier lines. So you're probably not going to be using that exact same reel to go after, trout and reds on the grass flats.
Regardless, just to be clear, so regardless of species, you still want to keep that percentage of drag to line breaking strength the same. And the reason is because, like, and especially for tarpon or a fish that's really fast, a running fish is getting resistance from your reel. Obviously, one thing that's a big resistance, but they're getting a lot of resistance from the water drag itself on the line as it's moving. So, like, an example could be, if you've ever done it before, is when you're clearing out line twists from your reel, and like in a boat, it's easy where you just let it cut off everything from the line, and you just let that line go out behind the boat, like 100 yards of it, and then just let it sit. It'll basically, the water running over the line will basically take those twists out. And when you get a lot of line out there, it's remarkable how much drag, like, you can literally bend the rod over with the tension, and it's only the water rubbing against the braid. And so that's why you set your drag at a much lower percentage of the line, because that fish is absorbing all of that tension of water drag as it's moving. Because if you do a 10-pound setting on your drag with 10-pound line, that fish is going to have water drag, and you're guaranteed you're going to break off every time. So that's why it's really, really important to keep that ratio intact. You don't set the drag based on the fish you're targeting. You set the drag based on the line you're using. And then you use the right line according to the fish you're targeting. So,
yep. Yeah, you guys should try that. It's a cool experiment. Obviously, do not let out 150 yards of braid if there's boats behind you or anywhere nearby. That is probably one of the worst things you can do. But it is kind of cool to do that if you're just in an idle zone. There's no boats anywhere to be found. You let out 150 yards of that line on your spool, and then put your rod tip down in the water. It feels like you got a fish on.
You literally have to set your drag so the drag doesn't start going out. Yeah. Like, it's surprising. And again, that's a big reason, because for years I would set my drag too tight, and I no telling how many, like, fish of lifetimes I lost due to that. And I had no idea. I was like, oh, I'd had a bad knot or whatever. Granted, my knots probably weren't the best, but a properly set drag should make sure that a knot never fails. Like, a fish should never break off with a properly set drag and a decent knot. Never, unless it gets around structure, right? You can't, that's sometimes there's nothing you can do on, like, dock fishing, but on the open flats, that's how those guys catch marlin with 2-pound line, right? So I think the record is like a 400 something pound marlin on 2-pound line, which is amazing. But there's no structure out there. So they just had the drag set properly. They just kept constant tension, and finally the fish wore out.
Marlin on 2-pound, that would be crazy.
Yeah, it's insane. Yeah, I was looking up the other day I was just on a tangent of something, and it was over 400 pounds, I believe. It was insane. Can't imagine. Do
you get that IGFA world record book?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, dude, you got to be a member. I guess you're not a member. It's pretty cool just to, on a rainy Sunday, to kind of look through some of those records. I mean, it is fascinating. And of course, they make money off the records. It's how the whole thing's kind of funded. And I don't remember how much you have to pay per submission, but it's a decent amount of money. And they've created so many, like, completely oddball ways to get a world record. It is fascinating. And so if you're into that, it's not as hard as you think, just because you can get creative and do kind of goofy stuff like that. And it's broken down by men and women. So some of the women's snook record, I've caught tons of snook bigger than, like, the women's all tackle snook record. It was, or maybe not all tackle, it was 10-pound. Just no one else had really done it. No one else had really submitted one. So it is kind of interesting to be able to say you got a world record.
Yeah,
and I love the fact.
There.
What's that?
When you get Sean out there, if there is a certain line class, let's get Sean out there on a good snook bite.
Yeah, we've got the kids here in quarantine. We've been practicing in the backyard. We set up some targets, and we put one of Jackson's little. It's like a little magnetic fish. It's made of plastic, and so it's not going to hook anybody. And it's a fun thing for the whole family. Get some practicing. Scholarships, baby. Bass scholarships now. Yep. Nuts. All right, let's get back on track. So I have a question for those anglers who still want to go buy a 1,000 or 2,500, 3,000, because all three are still going to sell great for their own reasons. Especially you mentioned, 1,000's got to be super light. Do you still pair it the same way? Like, do you still use the same rod, or does it get it out of balance? Like, how much lighter is a 1,000 versus the 3,000? And how do you think through that in terms of getting the right rod with it, which is a pretty critical piece of the whole equation?
The housing, so you can set them on the same rods. It doesn't matter, like, as far as like physically getting them on, right? The actual.
Yeah, I'm talking about pairing. I understand how to like apply a reel to a rod.
But there's a lot about personal preference. I prefer to have the rods balanced at a neutral basis, where like if I balance my rod on one finger, like with the reel attached, obviously, and line on the reel, I want that balance point to be about where I'm gripping onto the rod. And in many cases, especially with these lightweight rods now, if you get a light reel, a lot of the weight of the rod is in the front, because the high end rods have really light butts, because they just try to get as much of the weight out of there as possible. And so using the lighter rod can actually front weight a lot of the setups, meaning that there's the actual neutral balance point, instead of being like right about where your hand is, it's going to be way up the rod blank, which is great. If you're using top water lures and using a rod down retrieve, that's good. There's no problem, because you're not fighting gravity, right? Gravity is naturally taking the rod tip down. But if you're doing a tip up retrieve, it's just going to be a little bit of torque on the wrist. But again, for most, it's not that big of a deal. But it can be after a long period of time. It just can be a little bit less comfortable than it otherwise could be. But again, the overall setup is lighter. So, I don't know. I'm not going to say that you have to do one way or the other.
Like that almost 3 full day tournament that we did using artificial lures. And Dad, I thought he was going to go to the hospital. He his carpal tunnel was so bad. He's like, I can't cast anymore. Yeah.
But again, maybe the lighter setup could have been helpful. I don't know. It's just that'll be an interesting, I don't know how to even test that, like a lighter setup overall versus a tip heavy. I don't know.
But I will say, because we've asked a few people, why are they buying these 1,000? So we keep getting requests for it. And it does seem to be, if you guys saw a video recently, we took our dad for his 70th birthday, and remember what he said, he was using one of your setups, and he's like, man, this is so much lighter. And guess what he did? He's an insider member and bought a new Daiwa and a new rod just to have a lighter thing. So I'm saying this is, it feels like it's a lot of men and women in 60 and above who seem to say, all right, I'm just trying to get the lightest possible thing, just for my wrist or arthritis or whatever it might be. It does make a difference if you're using artificial lures. If you're using live bait, it's not going to really make that much of a difference. But for artificial lures, you can actually tell the difference, especially over a couple hours of just an ounce. And especially when you start talking about 4 or 5 ounces, like, it's a massive difference in a day of fishing.
But even in my like low 30s, I was still getting light stuff just because I do artificial only. And regardless of age, if you're doing a lot of casting, like, you're going to know by the end of the day. And it's one thing from going, because I used to use like the heavier reels, the heavier, much less expensive reels that were like, 11 plus ounces, 12 plus ounces for like a light tackle inshore setup. Just this Fuego 3000, right? The 3000 size, I believe it's like 8 ounces or something like that. So this is already a very light reel. And then to go to the even smaller one, you're going to shave off like an ounce. Actually, let me see if I can pull that thing up.
I thought it was like high 7s. The Fuego, and it might be a little bit more once you load it up with line, but
yep. But the key thing is, just it's more about I would say like the brand and the size versus like a 3000 reel of one model can be very, very different than a 3000 of another. So just going with the 3000 of a good lightweight kind is
7.6 ounces according to my brand new Fuego box.
And that's for what?
This is the Fuego 3000.
Okay. Yep. And I'm on their site now. And so when you add the line, it's probably gonna be around 8. And then the Fuego 1000 is 6.4 ounces. So you go down an ounce from the 1000 to the 3000, go down an ounce. But the starting point, right? The 7.5 ounces, that's a light reel. That's a very light reel.
Of course, you might lose some respect from your friends. That's a real cute reel there. What you going to do? Catch a couple little trout in the stream?
But again, as far as line capacity and drag capacity, I mean, you can be right in their face, right? When you catch the biggest fish of the day on the little small reel, I mean, it can quickly flip flop because it literally does hold all the line you need, and it has all the drag you need to go out and catch big fish.
Yep.
So if you do want to have some in your face moments to friends, then let them kind of do some digs at first, but they'll see the bright side at the end. And again, it's just the fact that it's small. Like I'm not sure, how it'll actually work over time. So I'm gonna be testing it out. I'm gonna put it on my normal rod and this 1000 size and see how it does. I'm gonna use it for a while and see if I see a difference in wind knots, any smoothness in drag, right? I know it doesn't have the 20-pound drag capacity, but I don't care about that. I just want it to be smooth. And so I'll be curious to see just how the drag is and who knows, maybe I'll like it more. But based on that initial test, I just don't think I will because the casting distance didn't have a positive benefit.
That means I am sticking with my new 3 here, baby. Now I just got to I got one of those new TFO rods to test. So I'm probably going to put it on that. And that's kind of the final piece of this. We all love reels. I get excited when this shows up on my door. I'm sure everyone listening here loves buying a brand new reel. It's probably why you're still here. But rods are still so much more critical in general for inshore saltwater fishing. Look, when you address the reasons why, not to try to talk you out of buying a reel, because you have to have a reel. But still, we made this mistake forever, and that was putting way too much focus on this. And then the rod was just like an afterthought. And you still need to put a lot of emphasis on this, but the rod also needs to have just as much, if not more, in terms of talking to people, going, as an insider member, going in our private community, asking questions about pairing, because we have Mark who helps out with all that stuff. And we want to make sure you have the absolute best rod with your amazing new reel. So what are the reasons that we have to spend a lot of time, energy, and money on a rod as well?
Well, as far as the core things, right, we have the rod, the reel, and also the line. We shouldn't. Those are like the 3 core things that need to be, I guess, a part of the decision factors when you get a new setup. And as far as importance, in my opinion, I used to think that reel was the first one, right? Because all the combos, like the combos they sell in stores, it's all about the reel and okay, hey, you get this rod with it type thing. It's like the Sedona combo, like, oh, cool, that's awesome. We got this free rod. But in reality, the rod is the most important and the reel is the least important. I put line above the reel for this light tackle spinning.
Yep.
Because all the reel does, right? Let's just look at it. All it does is retrieve line. Right, which all of them can be relatively smooth, especially out of the box. And then the price usually is a 4 factor or whatever the term is of how long it lasts with salt water. The cheaper reels will work great at first, and then they'll eventually get corrosion. But so all it does is reel line in, it retrieves line. Right, we know that. It provides drag when we're fighting the fish. We've already talked about that. But as far as casting, it doesn't do anything. Like all it does, it just gets out of the way. So the casting is really about the line and how much line you put on it. So it's the line that you're using and the gap between the line and the outer edge of the spool. The reel doesn't cast at all. Like spinning reels do not cast line. That's a big misconception. Like, oh man, how long did that? Oh, nice reel. How far does it cast? Like all the reel does is get out of the way.
Ask my rod.
Yeah, that's my rod. Ask my line, because those are the 2 determining factors of casting. For bait casting reels, it's a different story. Bait casting reels have a big play on castability. Spinning reels do not. All they do is literally get out of the way and let you, the rod, and the line do all the work. So as far as the rod is more important because it does way more things. It controls how far you can cast. how accurate your casts are, how well you can feel the strikes, hook setting power, right, and overall fighting the fish. So much more important. That basically, if the rod doesn't do its job, the reel doesn't even matter, right? Because the drag doesn't come into play until you hook a fish, and you can't hook a fish if you can't cast to it and you can't get a good hook set.
Ooh.
So, and also for lines, right, the line you're using is going to impact how far you can cast, braid versus mono. And if you go braid, 10 pound versus 20 pound versus 30 pound, all that's important. And even brands of braid, I've seen a pretty big difference on. So as far as the priorities, so rod number one, get a good line, and then the reel would be the third most important. So on anybody on a budget, most of the budget should go on the rod. Obviously, the line is not going to be the second biggest budget, but it should be an important decision factor.
And we've got studies galore, and we're constantly doing new studies, meaning tests, because we have no sponsors. We go out there. I mean, just like this reel, I paid for it with my own money. Yeah, I got my 20% discount as an insider member, but we go out and buy all this stuff ourselves, kind of like the Consumer Reports. We're going out and buying it. We're not getting freebies. And we're putting to the test. We're constantly testing stuff, constantly trying to break stuff, and then reporting what we find. So we'll put some links in the show notes if you're listening to this or watching it on YouTube or Spotify, iTunes, all the great places to listen to the podcast. Make sure to go over to saltstrong.com/podcast, and you'll see this episode listed there. And we'll put links to all of these tests, including some of the reels and rods that we recommend based on this Consumer Reports kind of mentality of just saying, here's the best value. There's some like that $800 Dio exists. I think it's pretty awesome, but let's just face it. Most of us aren't going to go spend $800 on a reel, no matter how awesome it is. And like Luke said, you probably, if you got that much money, spend it on the top, very best rod, and then pair it up with a nice reel. That would be mucho smarter. Other than that, guys, we love to hear from you. The last podcast got a ton of questions, interactions. These seem to be popular. Anything with rods and reels. Line, if you guys want us to do one of those next, let us know. Shoot any inquiries to fish@saltstrong.com. And of course, if you're an insider member, just go right to the community and post the questions there so we can all see it. We can all kind of comment and then do a follow-up with an actual video for you. So that's for our insider members. And if you're not an insider member, come and join us. Stop paying full price for all your tackle. Start saving money, start saving time. And if those two things don't happen, if you don't save more time and save more money on all your tackle, then you don't pay. It's literally free. We have the biggest, boldest guarantee in the entire fishing industry for an entire year. So that means if you have 365 days to get in, to look at all the shortcuts, to look at all the fishing reports, to look at all the regional maps and all the on the water, like real-time reports that we're doing, and all the Consumer Report stuff and all the discounts. And if you don't think it was the best fishing investment you ever made, then you can ask for your money back. That's how confident we are it will work for you. And that's why we just breached the 17,000 member marks, over 17,000 members as you guys are hearing this, and new people joining. It seems like every 10-15 minutes. So pretty awesome. And we hope to see you inside. You can learn more about that at saltstrong.com/pricing to see the price to join the club. It's only 27 cents a day, FYI. Cheaper than a cup of coffee.
Yeah, for anybody who likes catching redfish, sea trout, snook, and or flounder, I mean, it's it. There's nothing else that comes close as far as the amount of helpful information on the how-tos, and then obviously all the tackle you need you can get at a significant discount. So highly recommend anybody interested in those species to give it a shot. And obviously we're gonna continue growing it, but right now it's for those species. It is absolutely the best thing that's on the interweb.
Amen, brother. All right, guys, go check it out. saltstrong.com/pricing or saltstrong.com/podcast to see this episode and all the show notes. Otherwise, we'll talk to you on the next episode. Peace. We out.
Thanks.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul. It was pain.